Are you a landlord that is trying to figure out, do you want to do Section 8 or not? Have you heard all the horror stories? We are going to be talking about not only some of the bad, but mostly the good of Section 8 and everything you can do with it right after this. Hello, welcome to Real Estate Divas. I'm Kristen Gerst with Capricorn Mortgage Investments, and my lovely co-host is
Jaylee Thompson with Texel Real Estate and Real Estate Reformation.
And we're talking about Section 8 landlording, which a lot of landlords are so afraid to do this.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this before, and it's one of those subjects that everybody has an opinion about, but very few people have actually had any experience with. So I feel like it gets a super bad rap.
It does. And it saved me.
Yeah.
Back in middle 2000s doing only Section 8. And when the market collapsed, I had 61 doors, all rented Section 8. My balance sheet looked awful. It was in the red. All of my properties had lost 50% of value. But all of my mortgages, all of my expenses were covered because I had Section 8 tenants whose rent was guaranteed by the government.
Well, and you can't beat that. Like, that's one of those things that we were talking about whenever COVID first started, and all of these landlords that were struggling because now rent couldn't get paid or whatever. But with the Section 8, like, you're guaranteed, period, end of story. It's not a bad route to go.
No.
And people should not be scared about it. There's a process, but it's not a process that's that extraneous for a landlord. It's really more to protect the landlord, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you don't have to drive around. I mean, if you're doing low income rentals or, even lower middle class rentals, there's a chance you might be driving around to pick up rent in cash. With Section 8, it is deposited the first of the month into your account once you get it set up.
Yeah. Well, and so not only is it that guaranteed, but there's other things that the government puts in place as well, as far as what the landlords are allowed to do, right? It's regular check-ins, inspections.
Yes. So once a year when your lease is due, you're going to be inspected. That property is going to be inspected. That right there scares off a bunch of landlords. And I understand if you've got a shack that's falling down, no, that's probably not going to go Section 8. All you have to do is provide a clean and safe residence or property. So as long as you've got, a big one, do you have electrical plate covers on so that nobody can stick their fingers back in the hole? Do you have locks on your windows?
Yeah, locks on your doors.
Locks on your windows, locks on your doors. Do you have smoke detectors?
And smoke detectors these are all things that you would do, most landlords would do for their tenants anyway. So if you're already providing that, then why not? I think a lot of people also have the misinformation that somehow Section 8 means I'm taking less rent.
No, and that is, I'm going to say that is true depending on where your property is located. So because Section 8 is so big, it's run by zip codes. There are a lot of zip codes, though, that get a higher amount of rent
than what retail rent would be.
Because, and I knew where all of those zip codes were. So I knew if I had in Dallas, if I had it in 75227 or 75217, well, those were also Mesquite zip codes, and Mesquite would be higher than East Dallas. So I knew that even though I was on the Dallas side, these properties were on the Dallas side, I could maybe only get $700 of regular rent, but with Section 8, I was getting $995.
Wow.
And quite a bit more.
Yeah, that's quite a bit more. And if you're out there prospecting and trying to find properties and you already know, because obviously we're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so you knowing where those zip codes are and deciding that's where I'm going to purchase properties, well, a simple search or phone call to the city trying to figure out where those zip codes are, or let me see a chart of what what the approved rents would be.
Charts on the internet.
Yeah.
So you just go and like, okay, there's my zip code, and this is what a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, and a 4-bedroom would cost. So again, when you're looking at where to buy a house, yes, sometimes you're not going to get as much rent, but it's going to be close because
it's still compatible to market rents. It's not. No,
It is.
I feel like the thought process or the reason most people kind of steer clear is they feel like it's going to be substantially less than retail. And even in the areas that are not above retail, it's still, what's the word I'm going to say? It's still comparable, right?
Yes.
To what retail is.
Yes. And they can opt to pay you extra. The tenants can opt to pay you extra per month. I like to set up, technically the law, and I don't understand why this isn't 100%, but the government says that Section 8 tenants have to pay something. Typically, it's a minimum of $50.
Okay.
But here in DFW, there's I think 15 or 16 different housing authorities. And the biggest one is Dallas Housing Authority, not Dallas County, but Dallas Housing Authority. And that one allows 0 tenant portions. So knowing that, I had a bunch from Dallas County as well. And, sometimes they would have a $200 or $300 tenant portion. Now, they always had to pay that. But it was still better just to get it all in one lump sum and not have to chase that down if they didn't mail it in or send them envelopes or send them a rental statement or something. If I could just get it all from the government, it was better. So I would, of course, give preference
to the ones that
to Dallas Housing Authority.
Point of privilege.
Point of privilege.
Point of privilege.
When you say, I can assume what you mean by portions is what the contribution that the tenant
Yes.
is hearing. Is that what that was?
Yes.
I just want to make sure. I didn't know of the lingo.
Yeah, so if you have, right, so if your total rent that you're charging is $1,000 per month, they might have to pay $200 a month. I had one that had to pay like $550 a month. That was quite substantial percentage of that rent. I, of course, always preferred, because I knew that if I had the government backing 100% of that rent
rent was going to be paid.
that rent was going to be paid.
And you didn't have to chase it down.
No. And I had several tenants, Section 8 tenants, 3 that come to mind specifically, who would lose their jobs all the time. Like, they get a job and then they'd have to start paying something. And 3 weeks later, they'd lose that job. And then, the government would come in and pay 100% to get them caught up.
Yeah. So that was more of like a tactic, it sounds like, with those particular tenants.
Right.
Well, as far as, because I know that it's not only just Section 8, but I've had a rental where we ended up taking on somebody who was giving up a child for adoption. And so the adoption agency guaranteed the rent.
Yes.
And so there are those type of arrangements that you can set up as well. Like you can be a housing provider for, let me know if you've got a tenant that needs a place to.
And those, I think they will, to some portion, also guarantee that your house is kept up. Mm-hmm. With Section 8 in the government, if they don't keep that house clean, sanitary, and keep everything in good working order, if they create a lot of damage, they lose their voucher.
Wow.
And they will be randomly inspected during the year.
Wow. Not by you,
Not
but by
me.
somebody within the housing authority.
Correct. So I think
so it has the checks and balances.
It does.
Because I feel like that's the second concern. One, it's money. I'm going to have to discount this rent. And then the other is that, well, what if they destroy the property?
And there is that fear that, they would just be dirty and they would not take care of it. They have to take care of it. The waiting list to get a Section 8 voucher is, in some cases, 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. And if they've waited 5 or 6 years to get that voucher, they're not going to risk losing it by having the place trashed or destroyed. Now, it's not, is that 100% of the time? No, of course there's going to be instances.
But for the most part, I mean, when you're waiting and that's something that you're trying and you're diligently like trying to get this type of help, then you're going to do everything you can not to lose it. But I feel like those are the two things that everybody needs to pay attention to as far as
I've had more damage and lost more rent money from regular tenants
yes,
than I have from Section 8 tenants.
Yeah.
I did have one instance where she decided to check, like she's moving out. Doesn't, I'm calling her, she's not calling me back, not sure what's going on. I drive over there and she's just put the keys in the mailbox type deal. I walk in, there's trash everywhere. There's like a film of like brown up like 3 feet up the wall. It's like, what was going on in here? It almost looks like they were mud wrestling. I took pictures of everything and brought it to her case manager. And her case manager made her get on a payment plan.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So, and was the damage huge? No. I had to pay to get trash out of there.
And
clean it and, paint it. Was I going to do that anyways?
Probably.
You know, so it wasn't a huge damage thing, but yeah.
But just the fact that the checks and balances came into play and she had to pay up.
And she paid me back every penny.
Wow.
I had it, she paid for the painting, the cleaning, and the trash out.
Well, right there, just having that experience. Like I said, most people have all kinds of opinions out there of what they think about this or that, but very little experience usually whenever they're developing those opinions. It's just what they've heard or what they assume.
Right.
That right there.
I was just saying, do you think those opinions are based because they're not really looking at it from an investment standpoint, but more of like a like their politics or their political
I think
choices?
there's probably that,
there's a
and
stigma.
there's
stigma,
definitely a stigma.
I also think that a major thing is a fear of paperwork.
Yeah.
Because you're
that's
handed
true.
this landlord packet, the print is tiny, and a lot of people have a problem filling out these major forms. Really, it's not bad.
Tedious. It's tedious. It's like I'm dealing with SBA loan paperwork right now and going through it. There's nothing hard about it, but there's a lot of it, you know, and there's a lot of stuff I got to provide. It's not that I don't have it. It's just time consuming.
Yes.
Yep. And sitting there and going through it all. So I can imagine that that's an ordeal. I know that even working with the adoption agencies, when you're doing that and they're doing guaranteed rent, there's a lot of paperwork you got to provide there. They've got to inspect the property. They've got to make sure it's safe because they want to make sure that mother's safe so that the baby's safe and they can have the adoption go through. Well, so let's say, all right, we've changed everybody's minds on Section 8 and they are gung-ho to get these Section 8 or accept Section 8 applicants. What is the process? How do you
find
attract
one?
Yeah.
So all you have to do is have a property that a Section 8 tenant wants to rent. There's no place, you can't go sign up and get certified by a government agency or anything like that. No need. You just advertise your property for rent. I would go over the first step, if I were still doing this, is go to one of the Section 8 offices and see what newspaper, free newspaper publication that has places for rent is out front. In a bunch of, all over Texas, Arizona, a couple other states, we have something called the Green Sheet.
Yep.
It's amazing what's in the Green Sheet.
It is kind of cool.
It is very cool.
I used to always look at the Green Sheet. Like, I'd always pick it up. I want to
know.
see what people are selling. Now not as much because we've got Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or whatever. But I loved looking through that thing.
So, right. It's still fun.
Yeah.
I don't remember the last time I've actually picked one up, but I saw it, I don't know, outside like a laundromat or something, it was at a restaurant. I'm like, oh, what's this? And I picked it up. So back then, that was the only way I would get, it was all I needed to do. And I wouldn't put it on the internet. I would only put it in print because Section 8 tenants back then didn't have internet. Now everybody's got internet and you've got Facebook Marketplace. You've got anything that would advertise a an apartment for sale, the one important thing is when Section 8 tenants are scanning for an apartment they want to see, you're going through lists in some cases, and it's just a few words on why this place is great and the price. What you want to say is, I put stars around this and bold, Section 8 welcome, all caps.
Yep.
And then talk about what was good. It's 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, and it has a fireplace and a yard.
And one thing to note here, the reason that the waiting list is so long is because the shortage of properties out there that are Section 8, that will accept Section 8.
Right.
That is definitely one of the reasons. There's a large need for it. And I know just from listing, not just my own rental properties, but listing other people's rental properties, you put it out there, and I get a ton of calls from agents and individuals. Do you accept Section 8? Do you accept Section 8? And I swear there are some people that they just sit there and they make calls all day long trying to find somebody that is in their price range that accepts Section 8.
Oftentimes I would find, if I put an ad out there, I'd have 24 calls.
Absolutely.
I'd had that thing completely filled with Section 8 before I would ask, do you have your landlord paperwork? That's a huge one. If they say, well, no, I don't have that yet, my appointment isn't until next month when I get that. Say, hey, when you get your landlord paperwork, let me know. I also, I have them drive by the house and go, do you like it? Do you like the neighborhood? I know they're going to like the inside. It looks great compared to all clean, great compared to everything else. So, hey, drive by. Do you like the neighborhood? Do you like where it's at? Is this good? If they say yes, then I set up a meeting with them and I tell them to bring their Section 8 paperwork.
So I will say, after we spoke on this subject before, I definitely told several of my investors and several of my clients that were listing for rents, I'm like, consider it. Definitely consider it. And had a client take in the Section 8, and I basically gave her your entire outline. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to look for. And they couldn't be happier with their tenant. But when you say landlord paperwork, what is it? Because this was one of those things that I was totally unaware of.
Right. So when they go, they get accepted into the program. They have to go to some classes and do some stuff. Then they have their initial meeting with their caseworker in which they get this landlord paperwork. And it usually comes in like a folder, and it's got a property information form is basically what it is. You've got to put, hey, I'm the manager, this is who owns the property. If it's not in the system yet, you're going to have to bring in a warranty deed to prove that you own that property. You say, it's got this many bedrooms, this many bathrooms, square footage, really easy questions.
Really basic.
Then there's some harder ones on there to talk about utilities, what the utility allotment is. And again, especially if you're brand new, just, call up the housing authority and ask for help on that. A lot of this stuff can be done and should be done by the Section 8 tenant. I always, because I don't like handing Section 8 tenants my sensitive information, I definitely don't want to hand them my social security number or date of birth or driver's license or anything like that. So I would always, fill that out and just bring it to the Section 8 office for them. But technically they can do all of this themselves, go wait in the line.
And then submit it.
Right. I also found that if a Section 8 tenant went down to a Section 8 office, they might be there 6 or 8 hours waiting to talk to somebody. Whereas if I went down there, I was usually seen within 20 minutes.
Well, because they know this is a service, they really want to make it as easy as possible for landlords because there is such a shortage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the facts. There's a shortage and there's a need there. So if there's a need there and it's a guaranteed pay.
Well, and so the packet is the same every single time. It is super easy. And some of them I just had copies made because, it's, I'm signing this, that this is my management letter. Here's this that, talks about what utilities, what appliances do I offer? Am I providing all appliances?
Yep.
Does it have a washer and a dryer? Because you
Well, you want to make sure that you list those things too, because if you miss something and then let's say it comes up missing when the tenant moves out, you need to be able to prove.
more importantly, you get extra money per month.
Oh,
So you can
for
get
providing
for
the
providing
appliances.
a range. Typically, I didn't like to provide refrigerators because they break down so much, or like the ice machine breaks down, and
Yep.
you just don't want to have to repair all of that. But making sure that there's a microwave, a range, and a washer and a dryer that don't break down very often. Just having those things. It also less wear and tear on your unit if you're not moving major appliances in
In and out. Yep. Well, and typically, if somebody's moving their stuff in and out, they're not near as careful with, dinging a door frame or whatever as you would be.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the typical
But if
wear
you
and
can
tear.
make an extra $25 to $50 a month by providing appliances that will be completely paid for,
Yeah.
in a couple of years, yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what about let's say, all right, I've got somebody in there, they've gone ahead, they've done their due diligence, you've signed the paperwork, now they've submitted it, they've moved in, you've got that.
Well, you got to wait to move them in. So we've submitted the paperwork, then about 10 days goes by, and Section 8 will send out an inspector. Once they inspect and approve the unit, then you can have them sign a lease and move in. Now, some landlords think that you have to wait until everything's approved, but then your unit is just sitting vacant. Little known fact, if you go ahead and let them move in as soon as the inspection's done and you sign a lease for that date, Section 8 will pay you. They might not start paying for another 6 weeks, but they will back pay you for every day that they're there.
So you'll get that prorated rent.
You'll get that prorated big chunk in your first payment.
Nice.
It is good.
I like that. That's a tip of the day.
Now,
Repeat your tip of the day.
the tip of the day is that go ahead and move them in as soon as it's inspected and passed, because you will get all your prorated rent to that day that they sign the lease and move in.
I love that.
You do not want to move them in before the inspection is passed, because let's say it doesn't pass that inspection for whatever reason.
Yep.
You want to have access to it so that you can get it quickly fixed and back out in 24, 48 hours to pass it.
Gotcha. That makes total sense. I mean, and I think just knowing that, just knowing there's an inspection involved, but that you can move somebody in and immediately start getting paid, because, I mean, you might as well. It's
Right.
not like, you're doing anything with the property anyway if you're planning on renting to that person. So, yeah, that's fantastic.
It makes complete sense to do that.
Yep.
The other thing I love about it when you're looking at a prospective tenant, really I'm looking at the voucher provided.
Yep.
Because Section 8, obviously if there's a waiting list of 5 or 6 years to even get a voucher,
Yep.
if they have any violent criminal history or drug convictions, there is no Section 8.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's another concern of what kind of tenant am I getting? Is it going to be a criminal? Is it, is it a violent crime? Blah blah blah. That's one that I had forgotten about. That is the big. That's usually any of my clients that I suggest, or I say, hey, there's a Section 8 tenant that is interested in your property. Would you be open to that? That's one of their first
Right. Or is it
apprehensions as
is
well.
it a felon? Is it a criminal? No.
Yeah.
Because they don't qualify for Section 8. So no violent felonies. I'm sure that you can get, traffic violations or something minor.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
But it's not going to be somebody who is a murderer or something like that.
Gotcha. Well, so now they've moved in and you're getting paid. When you write that lease up, though, it's the individual's name,
Correct.
not housing authority.
Yeah, and they do have, Section 8 does have certain rules of what they want to see on the lease, and that's something you have to submit. So, I prepare the lease when I turned in the landlord paperwork. I estimate whatever day it's going to be. Obviously, that's going to change, but you just write sample across it. So it's
Gotcha.
not the official lease, but they'll look through it and go, okay, well, you've got the name of the lady with the Section 8 voucher, but we also need to show all of her kids' names.
Yep.
You know, maybe she has 5 kids, and we need to have all of those names on the lease as well.
So kind of like whenever you're going in, you're putting an offer on something, when you're writing up a contract, sometimes there's a different, especially if you're buying it from an LLC or something like that, they have certain things that they want you to put into that contract.
Right.
And so it's basically the same thing. They're like, okay, we need to see these things so that we can check that box and say it was filled out properly.
Yeah, and I always had my own lease, basically because when I got started, I didn't know that these were available at trek.gov.
Well, because we didn't really have internet.
We didn't have internet back then. Okay, so that's a good point. We
I
didn't,
mean, there's
we
that.
had internet,
not
but
to
not a
date
ton.
ourselves
Right.
or anything like that, but
so I just always used my own, and then I made sure and put in sections that they always required because I only did Section 8.
yeah.
Now, I mean, it's always good to use a form that's official from your state, wherever you're in. Every state, I'm sure, has them.
Well, and leases are pretty, there's not a lot of nuances typically. You know, the leases, the state leases are really the way you want to go.
Right.
And especially when you're dealing with a government entity.
Well, and people always think, oh, but, you know, I want to have my own lease, or maybe that's going to make me look more professional. It doesn't. All it does is make somebody have to read it a lot more closely. You know, I hate getting handmade contracts from people because I'm like, why can't you just do a Trek 1 to 4 family? I know what's in there, right? I can scan for the important parts. I can make sure nothing
Jumps out at me. Nothing's going to be hidden in there because I know where to look for it. Exactly.
So, and it's the same deal with this. So I always suggest make sure and just use one of the state approved forms.
So as far as repairs, like let's say they moved in, now they're moving out, what is the process for that?
You have to keep everything, if there's a water leak, okay, that's not the tenant's fault.
Absolutely.
But if they show up and there's holes in the wall because their kids went nutso with a hammer or something like that, they are required to get that fixed.
Required to get it fixed, or would it be like the payment plan that like your tenant was on whenever they left it dirty?
They are required to get it fixed.
Oh, wow, really?
Yes.
I don't know if I'd
In
want a
that-
tenant to get it fixed.
Well, and I agree with that. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of times, if it's something specific like that, they can ask you how you want to handle that, but they do have to pay for it. And
Nice.
it's not, the interesting thing with payment plans and Section 8 tenants, if they owe the landlord any money and it comes time for lease renewal and they say that they want to move out, they cannot
They cannot move out until that's paid.
until that's paid. And if they can't pay it and make it current, they have to sign a completely new lease for a whole year and stay there another year.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So I had one tenant in particular. I ended up selling this property with her in it. I had it for 12 years, and she was still there.
Nothing wrong with that. I like a long-term tenant.
Right?
I like a long-term
I mean,
tenant.
she stayed there. I mean, I remember when her babies were little,
Yep.
and she stayed there until they graduated high school, I think, and then she had to move out
Wow.
because she no longer had
Had
a vou-
those-
And
had
I
a
still
voucher.
never fixed the plumbing.
I never really, she asked about like 6 or 7 years into it.
Yeah.
And she owed, at certain times, she owed a lot of back rent. And she was one that would fluctuate year to year between owing nothing, owing $50, then she'd get a great job and it would be like $200 a month. And she would never make those payments.
Yep.
And I wasn't strict on her, especially when it was $0 or $50. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But we would get up to lease renewal and she'd owe $500 or $600,
Can't move
and
out.
she couldn't move out.
Yeah.
And I knew several years she wanted to, but she was basically stuck because she hadn't paid her bills.
Wow.
And she asked if she could paint it. She goes, hey, can I paint this? And, you know, the carpet's kind of messed up. I ended up getting her new carpet. You know,
Well, 12 years.
I mean, yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was 8 years into it. I'm like, yeah, let's just get some new carpeting for you. Not a big
Well,
deal.
and
She
paint,
painted it.
yeah, I've painted some of my rentals before whenever I was renting. I've painted several of them. And then when I'm moving out to get my rent back, then I paint it white again. I'm like, I want that deposit back. So what would you say are the most common violations whenever it comes to when it comes to renting to Section 8?
So they're real big on no paint chips.
Oh, so like the lead-based paint. So the violations or the things that they want the landlords to fix
Would
is
be, yeah, if you have paint that's chipping off the walls,
they want it painted, they want it that
clean,
fresh coat.
of paint. Electrical, exposed, electrical wires. I
need
had
a cover
one.
on those.
I had one inspector, Ephraim, and I loved Ephraim. He was a really great guy, but after I knew that he was walking around with something called a multimeter, and he would go in and test every single outlet. He was the only one that did that,
So just to make sure that they work.
just to make sure that they work.
Got it.
I always passed that, but I imagine that there were a lot.
Well,
that
yeah,
didn't.
especially when you're talking about older homes, sometimes, they just didn't know it doesn't work anymore and they're
Right.
renting to the next tenant. So,
Right. So no window screens. They want
Yep.
screens on the windows, locks on the windows, especially, if it's a first floor. Locks on the doors and the deadbolt. Security
Nice.
chain. Things like just having, the smoke detectors and any safety things in place.
well, and the smoke detectors are really, I know that there's plenty of rental places that you go in and they don't have as many as what are required, but you're really supposed to
Right.
do that.
I had one unit that we took off like the bottom handrail on one side of the stairs. And it wasn't very high off the ground. It was maybe 3 feet, and just to make it look better. But
you had to put it back
we had to
on?
put that back on. That was, and it wasn't a big deal. We still had it, thank goodness. So, and just making sure that everything is in working order. Hot water heater, they're going to test it.
Yeah. Make
They're gonna
sure
make
that
sure
they
that
have hot water.
Right.
So these are all things that you would do for a regular tenant. There's nothing that's on that list that is going to make you balk and go, they're asking too much. I can't possibly do this.
They're not going to walk in and go, wow, look at how old and outdated these
No.
kitchen cabinets or these counters are. No.
Good to know. So are there any other tips that you would put out there or little nuggets that you would tell people about the Section 8?
I would always say for my Section 8 tenants to get them to sign with me that my Section 8 deposits are only $50. Now, that scares the crap out of most landlords. But the reason why you do that is, one, to keep their voucher, they're required to keep that place perfect and turn it back to you how they got it.
How they accepted it. Yep.
So knowing that if they want to keep their voucher, there's not a real chance that they're going to damage the property.
Yeah, the risk is actually a lot lower than just regular tenants.
So when you're dealing with people that live hand to mouth, if they have a $50 deposit, they have to save up that money again because they're excited because they're getting back maybe $500 or $1,000 from a place they're moving to, and they have all of this extra money.
Yeah, that money is going to help them move into the next place.
Right. Now, if they don't have a big deposit to get back, they have to then work and save again to get it
To
back.
sock that money away.
So I found that having $50 deposits got you
Longer tenants.
longer tenants, 4 or 5 years.
I love that. That's a sneaky little
It's
tactic.
a sneaky little tactic. It does help. When I first started it, it was to attract more Section 8 tenants, to get them in. But what I found was it created longer Section 8 tenants as well because they just didn't have that.
Because it is so difficult to sock that kind of money away to get into a new place.
Right.
Nice. Well, if y'all have any type of suggestions, some experiences that y'all want to share with us as far as Section 8 or questions. I've had a little experience with Section 8. Kristen's had a lot of experience. So by all means, drop us a comment, question, anything like that, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We're trying to grow that right now and would appreciate the help. And I'm J. Lee Thompson with Texel Real Estate and Real Estate Reformation.
And I'm Kristen Gerst with Capricorn Mortgage Investments. Go out, don't be afraid of Section 8 tenants.
You got this.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.